So there was a man in Chicago who was driving through the city one day, and he got stopped at a stoplight, and he looked to his left, and there was a cop car sitting right there. So he wound down his window, and he said, "Hey, am I wanted by you guys?" And they wound down their window to talk to him, and when they put their window down, this enormous smell of marijuana from the guy's car just wafted in, and so they're like, huh. So they got out, walked over to his car. They could see the butt of a gun sticking out from underneath the driver's seat. So they started to search his car. They found an illegal loaded assault rifle, unregistered weapons, and ammunition. So the short answer to his question was yes, he was wanted by those guys. So there's actually a TV show, I don't know if you've ever seen it, it's called America's Dumbest Criminals. It is amazing. I mean, I could tell story after story the rest of the time. But the problem isn't that our criminals in America aren't exactly rocket scientists, that they're making a lot of mistakes. There's a general lack of wisdom in American society. Wouldn't you agree with that? And anywhere you look, in any direction, it's like, what are people thinking? What are people thinking? And I have so many examples of this. If you've heard recently, especially with the younger generation, they don't stay very long in jobs. They go less than 3 years or 3.5 years, and they're moving. Because why? Because they're not CEO after 3 years. My goodness, what's wrong with everybody around them? So on they go and job hopping. And then I read this last week, and I couldn't find the stat again, but somewhere between 80 and 90% of those people wish they wouldn't have left their last job. So eventually, you know what it's like. The grass is greener, right? It's always greener. And what happens? Sometimes you jump and it's not greener. It's actually worse. And that job hopping thing can eventually get you into a lot of trouble. It's just not wise. And then this woman, and this is so common in America today. So she was on a cruise. So what does she do? She crawls over the ledge on the cruise ship and stands there. Why? So she can take a selfie of herself hanging from the balcony. Well, needless to say, another passenger you can see took this picture of what was happening. She's banned for life from all cruise ships. It's like, are you kidding me? And you know that people are dying from doing this, right? Have you heard that? People are dying from, I got to get a photo op of me standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon. Or right by this predatory animal. I mean, people are dying for this. I didn't want to show you any of those. She survived, but it's like, if you really want to see this, it's everywhere around us. It's just like so much lack of wisdom. Common sense. There's nothing so uncommon in America today as common sense. I read this story this last week of a young woman who was going through an application process. She got the job. And the recruiter called to tell her, congratulations, you got the job. And the recruiter said, do you have any questions? She said, no, but my dad does. And handed the phone to her dad. And the dad asked all these questions about the company. And the HR person was like, what world am I living in? And if you really want to see crazy, go read social media posts from COVID, right? Wasn't it crazy? I mean, everybody had a theory about every single thing. And then there was the whole toilet paper incident, right? I mean, crazy. Absolutely crazy. There's nothing so uncommon in America as common sense. Now, here's the challenge with this subject. I go on and on with examples of it's like areas where we're looking at everybody around us and going, what the heck? What are you thinking? But the problem isn't that there's a lack of common sense or wisdom out there, right? The problem is that I'm not acting with wisdom in every area of my life. And the problem is that you're not acting with wisdom in every area of your life. I'm sorry if that's a surprise to you. It's not a surprise to me. I'm not perfect. I mean, think about the answer to these questions. Do you have any regrets in your life? Are there things you would go back in your life and undo if you could? Is everything going perfect today? In every area of your life, financially, relationally, career, spiritually. It's like everything's a 10 for you. Do you see trouble coming in any area of your life? Are there issues that are developing that are starting to grow in some area of your life? I mean, this is where we need wisdom, right? And the interesting thing is the Bible actually has books that we call books of wisdom. One of them was written by a man named Solomon. It's a book called Proverbs. And in Proverbs, Solomon, one of the wisest men who ever lived, said this. He said, I want you to get wisdom and get understanding. And when I read it, I always read it with some passion. It's like, he's like begging us, would you please get some wisdom? Get it. You can get it. And by the way, in the book of Proverbs, it says if you get wisdom, things like this will happen to you. By the way, many times the wisest people also get wealth. It's not a guarantee, but it is over and over again emphasized in the Bible. It's so interesting. We think that we should just be getting wealth for wealth's sake. And the Bible says get wisdom, and wealth often comes along with it. The Bible says that wisdom will protect you and it'll guide you and build better relationships. It'll give you more opportunities in life. It can even add years to your life. So my question is for all of you, when you thought about goals for 2023, how many of you thought, one of my goals for this year is I want to become wiser? And maybe even in a specific area of your life. Did it even cross your mind? See, the Bible would say, don't make success your goal. Make wisdom your goal, and you'll get success thrown in. Make wisdom your goal. So what does it mean? Well, we're starting a brand new series today, which I'm really excited about, called Wise Up. And we're going to talk about wisdom from the Bible. What does the Bible say about specific topics? And we're going to start with the topic of wisdom today. How can I gain wisdom? If it's so important to my life, how can I gain this? So I want to ask you to open your program. Grab your notes from inside. If you haven't taken them out already, grab a pen. Welcome to those, of course, you are watching online. If you go to our website at penhillchurchlife.com, you can download these notes and follow along with us. So we're not going to get through a lot of this today. We're only going to highlight a couple of things. The first thing I really want to emphasize is this. Wisdom will not happen until you and I have a teachable spirit. We have to become teachable. We have to have a teachable spirit. I was reading the story, was prepping this last week, of a man who is a professor at a Christian college teaching preaching. He taught how to preach. He said, teaching young men and women how to preach is like walking into a hospital, into the nursery, and telling women that their babies are ugly. That's what it's like. He said, when you know these young men and women stand up there with so much confidence, like, I know how to preach, I can do this, and so they start doing it, and they're terrible. They're terrible. I was terrible when I started. Terrible. Some of you are like, you're not much better than that. I get it, but you should have seen me back then. I was really bad, and didn't know I was really bad. And I totally would never want that job. So he's like, after that's over, they're done, and they've said 479 times, and they've lost their point, and they all these terrible things. He starts giving them feedback. You know what most of them do, like they get mad. But he said this, every now and then he said, someone will smile gratefully as I offer corrections and suggestions. And once in a while, someone may even say, you know what, I want you to be really tough on me. Tell me everything I'm doing wrong because I really want to do this well. And the professor said, I always know that person's going to be fine. They're going to be fine. Because they have a spirit that is teachable, and they're willing, listen to this sentence, they're willing to pay the cost of personal discomfort in order to be effective. Isn't that a great phrase? They're willing to pay the cost of personal discomfort in order to be effective. Now, the tricky thing about this subject, having a teachable spirit, is, what do you think the universal answer is if I ask everyone, in general, do you have a teachable spirit? How do you think most people are going to respond? Oh, right. Yeah, you're thinking it. Oh, yes, of course I do. I'm so teachable, Brian. Oh, so teachable. Right, okay. So the interesting thing would be to actually test that. And to test it, you'd have to start talking to the people around you, like your spouse, and say, honey, do you think I'm teachable? That'd be an interesting conversation starter at the lunch table today. Your parents, right? Do your parents consider you teachable? Oh, man. I knew everything when I was, a young man, 18, 25, in that time period. It was amazing to be me. I knew everything, right? Lord. Your friends consider you teachable. Would your children say that you're teachable? You're open to feedback and input from them. Would your boss or your coworkers say, so teachable? It's hard to know. It's the default assumption is yes, I am. But many times we're not. And so God gave us this amazing gift in our lives. It won't feel like an amazing gift, but it is an amazing gift to help us understand areas in our life where we need to become more teachable. And it's the answer to this. Letter A on your notes, where am I in pain? Where am I in pain? If you want to know areas where you need to begin to pursue wisdom, this is the question to ask. Because many times, not all the time, listen, let me say this again and really hear this, okay? Not all your pain, but much of our pain is an indication of an area in our life where we need to consider pursuing wisdom. Not all of it, much of it. Let me explain that. I read about a pastor who was traveling one day, and he was in the airport, and he was sitting by this businessman, and they were waiting for the same plane, and the plane kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed. And so they were sitting by each other for hours. And when the guy found out that the other guy was a pastor, oh my goodness, he started ranting about how angry he was at God. And he went on and on about God messed up his life, and God ruined this, and God ruined this. And finally the pastor couldn't help it anymore. He couldn't hold back anymore, and he said, you know, you've been talking to me a lot about how God's to blame for all the pain in your life. And he said, so tell me, you said that your former wife turned into a horrible and evil person. He said, what was your relationship with her like before she turned into that? How did you treat her? Were you good to her? Were you always faithful? Did you do some stupid things that might have added a bit to the demise of your marriage? And he's like, well, I did a few stupid things. And then so he said, well, you've also complained about how God's, how bad things are with the tax problems with the government. He said, did you ever let your spending get a little out of hand? Did you ever spend more than you earned? Did you ever buy something foolishly or impulsively? And he's like, yeah, I guess I did that too. And he said, okay, well, you said you're frustrated that nobody's going to give you a job right now. He said, were you a model employee at every place you've ever worked? If I called your last three bosses, would they be in a heartbreaking situation over losing an employee as valuable as you? And he said, well, actually, I just got fired because I lost my temper a few times and told my boss where to go eternally. Yeah, that's what we are like as an American society, right? And by the way, don't think out there, think in here. The two default things that we operate by in America when we go into pain is who can I blame? And it's always somebody else, right? And then how can I complain? Those are the two tactics that we use in America all the time. We complain and we blame. We complain and we blame. And blaming always takes your power away. Did you know that? Blaming always takes your power away. The moment you start blaming anyone, including God, you lose all your power to change anything. It's why what you see in America all the time is people repeat the exact same mistakes over and over and over and over and over again. Because as long as you're complaining and blaming, you won't change anything. You're only going to change once you take ownership. And so God would say, stop for a second. Maybe pain, and again, hear the word maybe pain is a sign that you're not acting with wisdom in some area of your life. Here's what the book of Proverbs says. The wisdom of the prudent is to give thought to their ways. Think about your ways. Think about it. Don't blame, don't complain, but really stop and think. What part do I own in this? What did I do wrong? What did I contribute to this? And in many cases, if you're abused as a child, the answer is zero, nothing. You did nothing to deserve that. You did nothing to own that. There are examples where it doesn't work, okay? That's why I'm telling you that one. But most of my pain in life, I have a contributing factor to it. Most of my pain in life, there's something that God wants to renew or change in me. So on your notes, I put key, and then I ended up changing the wording on this. So it says on your notes key, and it says pay attention. Scribble out the words pay attention, and just write that in. This is one of my core questions in life, in my spiritual connection with God. When I'm in pain, I will literally write the painful thing in my prayer notebook, and then I will begin to pray each day and say, God, what do you want me to learn from this? Because I want to assume that God has something to teach me no matter what the pain is or where the source of my pain comes from. So I did this. You know what? Actually, one thing I'm a little bit uncomfortable about. Last fall, there's a sermon I would like to delete from our old calendar last fall. I had something painful happen to me, and I got really mad. And it tied a little bit into my sermon that Sunday, quite a bit. And I talked about my anger that Sunday and how angry I was and frustrated I was. And I don't like that. I don't like that that's that I was talking about, because that's the question I started asking that day. And it was so fresh, I was still really, really upset about it. I was still angry about it. It's not that it was wrong for me to be angry. It's like I wasn't conveying that I actually believe in a God who can do that, who can teach me. That's what I regret about it. Because I didn't feel like I was demonstrating my trust in God in the middle of something painful. But that's the question I began to ask. I wrote it in my notebook, I put a date by it, and I said, God, what do you want me to learn from this painful thing I've just gone through? Because it was still rough and raw. And I can tell you now, 5 months later, that the list underneath that has been, God answered that prayer so big and taught me so much from that painful thing that I can honestly and authentically tell you right now, thank God it happened. Thank God for that painful thing. Because if he wouldn't have let me be hurt the way I was hurt last fall, I would not have made the changes that I needed to make. And pain is often an indicator, and this powerful tool in the hands of God, if we bring our humble, teachable spirit to God and say, what do you want me to learn from this? It's often where he goes, oh my goodness, I have so much good for you. And he can bring good out of awful things that we go through. Matter of fact, there's a Christian song on the radio right now, and I love the chorus. It says, if it's not good, God's not done. If it's not good, he's not done. Because he can bring good even out of painful things that are done to us. And that's been my experience. So this is why we want to pay attention to the pain in our life and be asking ourselves, is there wisdom that I need to be considering about this? So maybe today, when you look at the painful things in your life, you're like, okay, the honest thing is I need more wisdom in some area of my life. I need more wisdom about how to have healthy conflict with people I care about, right? Huge issue in America. We do not know how to have healthy conflict. We just get mad and divide. And we separate. Some of you know that you need wisdom to know how to begin to move past some of the pain from your past, because it just keeps affecting you and holding you back. For some of you, you need wisdom about how do I develop healthy habits for romantic relationships or marriage or connecting deeply with God. Here I am, I talk all the time about how much I love getting up early so I can be on my knees talking to God in prayer and how much he's answering my prayers. And I know that sometimes I've talked to people who are like, that frustrates them because they pray and nothing seems to be happening. It's like, what is, God have favorites? He doesn't have favorites. I promise you that. What he's done for me and so many others he will do for you. And some just like, I don't know how to do that in a way that makes it really come alive. Where, I mean, it literally is my favorite part of the day. It's just my favorite part of the day. He literally changes my attitude, and he gives me hope and joy and contentment and peace in that connection with him. And I want it for everybody to experience it as well. Some of you know that, the pain, like that man in the story, it's time to address some work habits that are really wrong. You don't get to say those kind of things to your boss and keep being employed, right? He had a temper issue he needed to address. And many, many Americans are struggling with how do they manage money in the middle of a world like this. So where are some areas in your life where you might need to develop some wisdom? Maybe I didn't put yours up there. Maybe there's something else you can think of. And so now, this is where I'm going to turn the corner, jump down to point number 2. I want you to think about this. So this is where we begin our search for wisdom. Once you are aware that you need it, and pain is often the indicator that you need it, now time to go after it. Go after wisdom. Seek it. Like Solomon said, get wisdom, get understanding, and there's an urgency to it because your life will only be better once you start to get it. And again, it can feel a little bit intimidating. It's like, great, where am I going to look for wisdom in a world like this? Because the world around us feels really, really broken. Doesn't it feel broken to many of you? It's like, wow, this is a screwed up world. It's like even basic things have changed. Like we used to actually know how to spell words, and now we've even lost that. We don't even know. Now grammar is just gone. So, and that's affecting people, especially people who go get tattoos, like these poor people. So look at this, right? Knowledge is power. For those who don't know, that's not how you spell knowledge, okay? So it's not working out for that person. How about this? Daddy's angle. Oh, don't you want to be daddy's little angle? That's just a beautiful thing. It's not how you spell angel. Or my favorite one is no regrets. Let's have a no regret life from now on. No more regrets. Off we go. That's not how you spell regrets. I wonder if they regret spelling regrets as regrets. I don't know, but hey, I mean, it's the world we live in. And so you look at a world like this, and it sometimes can feel like, okay, great. We're supposed to do what Solomon says. Go get wisdom, go get understanding. How? Matter of fact, if you read one of the wisdom books of the Bible, Proverbs chapter 8, the book of Proverbs, in Proverbs chapter 8, here's how Solomon describes wisdom. It says, you know the idea of personification? It's to take an idea and make it into like a person. Here's what he says. Listen as wisdom calls out. Hear as understanding raises her voice. By the way, personifies wisdom as a woman. And it says, on the hilltop along the road, she takes her stand at the crossroads. By the gates at the entrance to the town, on the road leading in, she cries aloud. And he's saying, and says repeatedly in this book, it's like there's wisdom all around you. She is here and she will teach you if you just start to listen. And that can feel a little frustrating. It's like, have you been to Dodgeville lately? I don't hear her anywhere. You been into the Southwest Wisconsin? It's like, what are you saying, Solomon? How can you be saying that it's like she's everywhere and wisdom will help you and guide you and make your life better and you're just supposed to start searching for her? And so let me give you some practical steps you can take if wisdom is what you're needing. So the first thing, and I love this book, read the book of Proverbs. So it is one of my favorite books in the Bible. I constantly read in there. I know some people who try and read a chapter every single day out of the book of Proverbs, despite what else they're reading every day. And the cool thing is Proverbs only has 31 chapters, so if you have a 31-day month, every month you're just reading through it. Every time I read Proverbs, I come up with things that I never noticed before. I would recommend, if you've never read it before, start with chapter 9. The first 8 chapters, he's just making the argument that wisdom is what you need to be going after. And in chapter 9, he starts saying these little pithy, wise sentences, statements that I just find so fascinating. And make it a goal. For some of you, this would be a good goal for the rest of the year. Read one chapter a day. And pay attention to anything that really gets your attention. And so I was reading Proverbs this last week. Here's what I read. Look at this verse. Simpletons only learn the hard way, but the wise learn by listening. And that just struck me when I read it, because it's exactly what we're talking about. There are 2 ways to learn things, right? There are 2 ways to learn things in this world. There's the hard way. You get hurt really, really bad. And at the bottom, when you've hit the bottom, you're like, I don't want to do that anymore because that really hurts. And that's what he's saying. Some people only learn the hard way. They suffer so much that they're like, I don't want to do that anymore. But he said there's another way. The wise learn by, what's the word? Listening. He said if you want to become wise, then you've got to become a great listener. And then you get all these positive things without the pain. Without the pain. Wouldn't that be wonderful not to have to suffer, but just learn because we're going to go listen? So I love this book. I learn from it all the time. So I want to encourage you, if you've never read it, to take a look at it. Another thing to do, which very few Christians do, and it's just amazing because I want to show you what the promise is. You can ask God for wisdom. You can ask God for wisdom. Now, here's what our God can do. This is, I don't know his, it's hard to pronounce his name. It's Axolotl, something like that. He's called the Mexican walking fish. And you can see why, right? Look at that smile. Did you know that this little guy can regrow lost limbs and regrow body organs? Matter of fact, he can regrow the same limb up to 5 times, and he can even regenerate parts of his brain. I thought, wouldn't that be amazing for Chicago Bear fans, just to be able to regrow that part of them that makes them Bear fans? I'm like, I know, terrible, sorry. But isn't that incredible? To regrow part of the brain, to regrow limbs, get cut off, and it just grows back. Isn't that incredible? Our God made this animal and wasn't stressed, didn't have to think, didn't have to spend 6 months planning, well, what should I make it like? He just made it. He just made it. Because he's so smart This is why the Bible says his ways are not our ways. It's not like, and this is what we have in this kind of silly notion of God. It's like we're here and we're really smart, and like God's, like here. He's just a little bit smarter than us. Are you kidding me? It's not even close. The gap, I could never widen my hands far enough to reveal the gap between his knowledge and wisdom and ours. None. There is no way I can represent it. That's why the Bible says that so many times it's mystery what's happening to us. That's why the Bible never tells you to ask God why he's doing something in your life, because that's hard. Sometimes you go through something painful, and the question we ask is why? And it's an impossible to answer question. If you want to see how hard it is, go to somebody who just had a baby and sit down to the baby and try and explain calculus to that baby so that they learn calculus, okay? That's still not wide enough to explain the gap between the wisdom and knowledge of God and us. Because I don't have any idea how to create that. None. And he didn't have to even hesitate as he made that and millions of other species that can do incredible things. This is our God. He's incredibly wise. And you want to know what he made a promise to us all about? Look at this promise. If any of you lacks wisdom, you know what you should do? You should ask God, who gives generously. And to some of us, no, to all, without finding fault. And look at what the promise is. It will be given to you. In every situation, God stands ready to make you wiser with him than you would ever be on your own. Because remember, like we talked about last week, he wants us to trust in him and depend on him. He wants us to bring our needs to him so that we rely on him. And this is my constant prayer. I didn't bring my prayer notebook with me, but in my prayer notebook, I literally have that verse written out. And when like this morning, I was praying through my prayers, and I put my finger right on that verse. And I said, hey, God, you promised me that you will make me wise, so thank you. Thank you that you're making me wise, and I listed the things that I'm going through right now where I need wisdom. And I thanked him in advance. And some of you are like, see, Brian, that's why I don't believe in answered prayer, because you're kind of, right? You're not very wise yet. And I'd say to you, if you look at me and say, not very wise yet, you should have seen me before I started praying. And here's what God will do. It's like, well, how's he going to answer that? Is he going to make the neurons in your brain connect in new ways? I don't know. But one of the things I know he does is he uses other people to answer that prayer, which is this one. Wisdom, remember what he said about wisdom? It comes from listening, right? You got to listen to the right people. You got to listen, you got to learn from and listen to the right people. Look at the verse in Proverbs. Walk with the wise, and what happens to you? You become wise. But associate with fools and it'll get you in trouble. For some of you, that last part of that sentence describes your entire high school experience, right? You hung out with people that you shouldn't have been hanging out with, and you got in a lot of trouble. A lot of trouble. Because who you associate with is going to impact the experience you have in life. And God says, listen, put yourself around wise people, and wisdom will be the outcome of it. And this is where we have an advantage. This is where what Solomon was talking about in Proverbs chapter 8 about how wisdom is everywhere and you can just hear from it. We have more access to wisdom right now than any other time in the history of the world. Because you can literally start making calls to people who are, and I'll get back to that in a minute. That one won't make sense, but hold that thought. Podcasts and YouTube and audiobooks and books, and there's just there's not a lot of great stuff that comes about the internet and being so connected, but this is one of the amazing ones. You can have access to wisdom right now in any area of your life where you need it. And there are so many things you can do with it. If you are struggling, if you're like, okay, I know I need to get wiser in the way I'm interacting with my spouse, then that's the name to know right there, the Gottmans. They are the best at marriage principles. My wife subscribes to their Instagram. And so she gets constant Instagram updates and reads them that way. I subscribe to their newsletter and read them all the time. Many times we'll print them out and talk about it on a date because we're just constantly learning this way. So we're receiving input. Remember what he says? The wise listen. So if that's where you need wisdom, go get it. It's right there. It is accessible to every single one of us. And if you like to read, you can read their books. I mean, any of those things. They have all these things. They got podcasts, YouTube. They don't have mentoring calls, but podcasts, YouTube, audiobooks, books, all of this, and so many internet resources. If finances are your thing, you know my guy is Dave Ramsey. That's the guy I love. Matter of fact, I just got his newsletter. He sends a weekly newsletter. I just got it this morning. I was paging through it before coming here this morning. I'm like, there's so many articles I want to read. He's just got so much wisdom about money. And if finances are your thing, that's the person to go to. You literally can go to his website and sign up and take a course online now. We used to have to do it only in these big kits you bought and all this. So much simpler now. So much simpler. You can, at any time, get on the same page financially. Career stuff, LinkedIn is amazing. And I'll show you how in just a minute. Because some of you don't like where you're at in your career. Some of you do not. This is the thing that causes you the most pain. You either want to move into a different field, you don't like what you're doing, or you don't like who you're doing it for. Maybe you like your job, you just don't like who you're doing it for. Right? So there are all these different potential things, and LinkedIn is an amazing resource where you can get wisdom. And like I said, I'll give you an example of that. Some of you have secret addictions, you got pain from your past, and there are so many resources on the internet. There are newsletters by counselors, and I'm on a couple of them, where they just constantly send out information about how to deal with some of the things that you're struggling with. And you can find so many resources. So let me give you an example of this. Many of you know that for this is my part-time job. My full-time job is I'm a talent development manager, and I do leadership development and talent development. And I love both those subjects. Leadership development is my favorite thing to do. And so I don't consider myself to have achieved or arrived at any real knowledge yet, and so I use LinkedIn. So all you have to do for someone like me who wants to learn more is I just go on LinkedIn and you just have that little search box and you type in leadership development. And then it'll give you multiple things. One of them will be people who do that for a living. So months ago, I just typed in leadership development, saw all these names, and I started writing them. You can connect with people on LinkedIn. I just sent them a note and said, hey, I see you do this for a living. And I write them a little note, and here's my note says, basically every time. I see you do this for a living, I do it for a living, I'm not a salesman. That's what you have to say if you're going to reach out to anyone on LinkedIn. I'm not selling anything. Otherwise, you'll get no response, because the bulk of what I get are sales calls. So, and then I just say, I'd love to learn from you. Would you be willing to take a call with me? I promise not to waste your time. 30 minutes is all I need. Every single person I reach out to says yes. Every single one. You know why? Because people like to talk about what they've learned. Every single person. Now, I'm sure eventually I'm going to have someone not say yes to me, but it hasn't happened yet. I did 3 of those calls in the last week, 3 of them. The last one I did was this amazing leadership author. Matter of fact, the way I connected with him is I read his book. I'm like, this is an amazing book. So I posted on LinkedIn. I said, look at this book. This is incredible. Anyone ever read it? And the author wrote and said, I read it. And I said, I'd love to talk about this sometime. He said, I'd talk to you. So I get to have conversations with this man who did leadership development all over the planet, all over the globe, at some of the biggest industries. And so I was having a conversation, a chat with him yesterday. He's just an amazing man. And I always come with my questions prepared, and I was asking him something about a question about leadership development I've always wondered about, and he just started telling me that he answered a question I've always wondered about. And not only did he answer it, it was like stuff he'd known and forgotten. And he started telling me this and gave me a chart and walked it through, and I'm typing as fast as I can. And he's like, now don't forget the arrows, now don't forget this, and here's how this all connects. It was a piece of information I would never have, I've looked for the answer to this for so long, and this guy just knew it. And all I had to do was ask. There are people right now that you could ask who have answers to questions that you've wondered about in many areas of your life, but especially your career. And the only thing stopping you from knowing it is you haven't asked them. That's it. They'd love to talk to you, and they'd love to tell you what they've learned. And that's where it becomes just like Solomon said in Proverbs 8. Wisdom is all around you. She stands in the internet, screaming out among all the noise. And she's in our street corners. And she will change your life if you start to listen to her. So think through this as we finish today. Look through the areas of your life where you're in pain. Really think that through. And is the pain an indication that you need to go after wisdom in some area of your life? Don't do what Americans do. Don't blame and don't complain. Let those things go. You stop blaming. It gives all your power away. You will never change when you start blaming. Always own your power. Ask God what He wants you to learn in that. Really give thought to reading through the book of Proverbs, and just such a great book. You can read it online if you want to. It's always, your phone can access it anytime you want to. Don't forget to ask God for wisdom, and then watch what He does, because He's going to help connect you with the right person. So when you've identified the area where you need wisdom, then go online, use something like LinkedIn, and find somebody who's doing what you want to do. And start asking. Now, let me give you one thing I didn't say about that last one. About half the calls that I do, I get off the call, I've learned nothing. So I wanted to say that. It's not always amazing and transformational. Sometimes it's interesting and I'm done and I have nothing actionable. But about half the times, it's incredible. So have some realistic thoughts when you start doing that. But Solomon said, if you'll start asking and listening, then wisdom will be what you get. Let me have you bow your heads as we finish today. Now, again, spiritually, I talk so much about this, about Jesus. He is my focus in this world. He is my number one treasure, and many of you have this same focus. But some of you are just exploring your faith, maybe here online, and you're wondering, when we talk about this God is a real God. A real God who will answer your prayer for wisdom, for instance. Who will guide and set up these divine appointments in your life. He will do that. But the very first thing He wants from you is He wants you. And the Bible says that the reason why Jesus came into this world is to give His life on a cross for all the unloving things that we've done in this world. Jesus paid for us and then rose again, and any person who starts with Jesus gets this new relationship with God. And maybe for you spiritually, this is where you need to begin today. You can just cry out to Him. He will hear you. You can say something like this to Him. Say, Jesus, I know that I need You. And I've heard that You gave Your life for me because You love me. So I'm giving this life back to You. Please forgive me. I want You in my life today in a deeper, more meaningful way. And I really want to have Your guidance and protection in this world. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, as we finish, I ask every week, would you just take your little connection card out of your program, and if you're regular tender, just put your name down. But maybe you asked Jesus to forgive you or renewed your commitment, let us know. Some of you have decisions that you really need wisdom right now that are happening in your life. You can just let us know. We have a team of people that will pray for you. There's a prayer request section on here. Again, if you want to sign up to come and cook with the group that's going to be here, that's a week from Tuesday at 5:30. Just put your name down, say cooking, and then we'll know that you're going to be coming. But then just drop this in one of the 2 offering boxes back on the back wall where you came in. Thanks for coming. Hope to see you again next week.